the destroyer of worlds.
A few days ago, NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg spoke about diplomatic efforts of conflict resolution. The statement shows hesitation at the top of NATO to choose a further strategy of action. What it looks like to me right now is they're moving towards the direction of a global war. The actions of NATO countries in relation to Kaliningrad confirms my point. Lithuania, a member of the European Union and NATO, on June the 18th banned goods subject to EU sanctions from passing through the territory to the Russian exclave Kaliningrad. And since June 17th, Lithuania has been blocking shipments of goods such as construction material, metal and coal into Kaliningrad on the strength of EU sanctions imposed on Russia in response to Russia's special operations in Ukraine. And who do these sanctions hurt? The civilians of Kaliningrad. Is that fair? No. There's a reason to believe that NATO is persistently looking for a casus belli, an act or situation that provokes or justifies war. Nobody wants war in their right mind. And if Russia is provoked, its patience runs out. You bet. We may see the destruction of world civilization.
Уже испытанного на поле боя нового оружия. Войска начали поступать не имеющие аналогов в мире комплексы противовоздушной и противоракетной обороны С-500. Проведено успешное испытание тяжелой межконтинентальной баллистической ракеты «Сармат». Планируется, что уже в конце года первый такой комплекс встанет на боевое дежурство. Нет никаких сомнений в том, что мы будем еще сильнее.
And what about the people of Ukraine, my friends? Judging by the statements of NATO strategists, a tragic fate is in store for them all. The irresponsible governments of the Western world understand this perfectly well, that the Kiev regime has no other resources for the continuation of hostilities except human ones, and no supplies of Western weapons will be able to radically influence the course of confrontation, and that's a very terrible situation for the Ukrainians to be in. After the defeat of the well-trained elite units of the Ukrainian armed forces and the National Guard, Zelensky's puppet regime has been fighting for a long time using the human waves method, throwing tens of thousands of mobilized citizens to the front line, many of whom have never held a weapon in their hand. Tell me, is this fair? I don't think so. There are examples in history where the tactic of human waves gave certain results. For example, during the Korean War of 1949 to 1953, when Mao Zedong and Kim Il-sung sought to balance the superiority of the United States in weapons and combat training with the advantage in manpower. However, there's a significant difference here. The Koreans and the Chinese were passionately charged and ready to suffer millions of losses just to stop the colonizers. But it's not the same in Ukraine, my friends, because the residents of Ukraine in 2014 were promised life like Europe, the heaven of Dajjal, the Antichrist. And look what's happened. The country has turned into cannon fodder for NATO. It's been turned into hell. Today, the Kiev regime continues to hide combat losses. The advice of Decrue, as well as borrow from the EU and Prime Minister of Her Britannic Majesty, Bobblehead Boris Johnson, and other Western leaders who call for winning on the battlefield, can only lead to losses on the Ukrainian side, and these losses will go to hundreds of thousands. This must be stopped. But perhaps this is what NATO wants, which is described by the formula as many losses as possible among those mobilized in the armed forces. The goal is to create a condition for historical trauma, for the cult of resentment and hatred towards Russia, with the guaranteed military defeat of the Ukrainian army. Let me be absolutely clear, I'm not enjoying this one bit, despite what NATO has done to Eastern countries, but I'll tell you this for a fact, Ukraine will not be able to win or even fight for a long time using the tactic of human waves. After exhausting human resources of Ukraine, NATO will face a choice, either to fight on its own or to form and transfer many thousands of well-trained mercenaries to Ukraine, which is problematic right now. NATO needs to be sobered up, and they can only be sobered up by the speedy defeat of the Kiev regime. So far, NATO member countries are moving in the direction of inciting a global conflict. Russia doesn't want that. Nobody does. Keep an eye on further NATO summits before the end of the year. They'll keep on coming up with more reasons for it to be called the World War III Summit. Over and out.
Победы